All right, so everyone, welcome in. Glad to have you here with us. This is our monthly edition of Tableau Live from Boulder Insight. This is our chance to give back to the community and help answer your questions, solve some of your problems that you may be dealing with in Tableau. So a nice group of you here today. We do have one question in our form, but I do want to just encourage everyone, if you have questions that maybe you didn't know to put in the form or that came up last minute, go ahead and put those into the chat here in our Zoom call. Normally we do have a link. I'll put that in to the chat as well in case you want to save that for future calls here in Tableau Live. But if you put your chats into your questions into the chat channel, that'll be the most direct way to have those addressed today here. So just a quick introduction. My name is Tim Holmberg. I'm a trainer and a consultant here at Boulder Insight. I'm seeing some faces and names that we may have either taught or worked with through some of our client work. And then there's also some of you that are new faces to the group. So welcome in. We're glad to have you. If you are a returning member of this meeting, you normally get to see Heather with us, and then you also would be familiar with Chris, but we'll introduce Chris. This is Chris Cox. He's our main head cheese here at Boulder Insight. So Chris is going to be kind of heading up some of your questions and bringing that insight to the conversation today. So yeah, well, we'll kind of give the mic to you, Chris. Do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think that's good. Paul, you have the first question. Do you want to kind of state your question, or do you want me to just kind of dive right in?
Sure. You put some color on it a little bit. I got to take the training on Tableau, reasonably comfortable with BI tools, and working on projects by myself. And there is some thought about spinning up like a tiger team in-house to sort of be part-time on developing out some dashboards. So, you know, I'm happy because I'll get a little help to get this project sort of going. And yet I'm also, you know, a little bit scared because, you know, it's going to be people who might have backgrounds with BI or at least have a desire, you know, people from all walks of life at work. So how best to gather their ideas and requirements and, you know, maybe have any templates or advice around, you know, like documentation of requirements and working together on a BI rollout, as opposed to saying, you know, like, you know, you own this and go work with the business to find out what kind of dashboards they want. Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, well, yes, it does. So first off, I think the first step is to not ask the business what they actually want, because you're going to be limited to what they can think of. Okay, so the first step in all of this is really to ask, is to kind of do it actually backwards. So if I'm going to the business, what I'm asking them is to actually tell me, okay, what are your actions? So if you had the perfect data, don't worry about how you get it or what it is. What would you change? Do you want to hire somebody? Do you want to fire somebody? Do you want to actually set client expectations differently? Do you want to do you want to know when to bring people back into the office? So give me the list of the what you want to do. Then those to me separate the different dashboards. So I would lay it out to say, let's have one dashboard around one concept of a kind of a why. And then from there, then your tiger team, I would separate them out into each one of those separately. I wouldn't worry about kind of a Tableau template at this point or any of that stuff. I would just worry about kind of answering the question, then figuring out then you back into the next question. Okay, well then what type of data would you need to kind of get to that answer. Oh, well, I'm going to need to go to accounting. I'm going to need to get this, and I'm going to need to go over here to marketing and get this. Okay, great. So once you know, so now every question would have some sort of data sources. So then you look across all your questions and say, okay, well, this one data source in accounting is across all of these versus this marketing is only in one or two. So you start kind of figuring out, you know, do you have all the data in one spot? Do you not already? Typically people don't. Typically it's all over the map. And so that's kind of how I would start any project. It doesn't matter if it's a tiger team or not, but that's really the first step. Teaching somebody how to do that is not impossible, but I think just giving them that language and, you know, don't have them come back with, oh, well, that they actually want this pie chart or they want this bar graph. Don't ask those questions, because there's always better ways to see it. And what you'll find is that the business will almost always default to this whole cross tab, and then just show me how to do this like a data actually dump, right? So typically the business users are used to just getting the data they need, and then they put it in Excel and do something with it. If you can get them to answer what they're actually doing with it in Excel, then you can save them all that time. Okay, so that's kind of first off. Second is there's not a great collaboration tool, so you can't have everybody working on one workbook at the same time, but that's where your business concepts come in. And so knowing that your business is not going to be able to really think about everything at once anyway, I would separate out the different whys on the different people of your team. And then from there, it kind of comes into really, do you have a concept around how you organize? How do you name your calculations? How do you do calculations? This is something that we actually do in our like a company kind of a lot. I'll show you one. I'll show you my screen real quick. This is one of the ways that we like organize. I'll share the screen, then I'll pull over this other dashboard. Like for example, this is one we just actually finished working on for a client, and I kind of had like this is my thought process today. Because we didn't have any questions, so I was thinking about, okay, well, if I have to talk about something, I can talk about this, but I think this comes up into something that we can deal with. Actually, let me kind of back up for a second. Actually, before I go into this, let me see if that was helpful or not. Is that helpful? Kind of talk through that?
Yeah, especially where I think you're going with this idea of like, where would you put the to-do list? Imagine a team that uses Confluence and a wiki, and it's like, okay, we're going to have like a list of all the whys, and now we'll put somebody's name next to each one of them, and then what do they put under that as sort of like a way of working collaboratively but independently, especially since anybody on this team is probably going to be part-time for me. It's not going to be like they're fully dedicated to this, but instead they're going to be like subject matter expert for a day.
Yeah, or a week. That's going to be tough to really have them be hands-on and actually building. I think if you have a part-time, so they're going to do it for a day and then they're gone.
It's yet to be really defined. Like I might have one helper or something like that, but for the most part, it'll be people heavily vested in the success of the project. Lots of advice to give. Those kind of tiger teams. And so I want to be like, okay, well, here's some work you could do, and here's some way you could actually help. Help us define, help us. Don't just like you say, don't make my work harder by coming back with a bunch of like, oh, you need this chart, you need that chart. But instead, give them something to do. Yeah,
the kind of risk I see that you're going to run into is that there's a lot more that goes into it than just building like Tableau. So kind of how we look at it is, for a long time, clients would hire us and say, hey, can you like build us this dashboard? So that really falls in this like Tableau development world. But the problem is that we were really defining the project. We were coming up with a design. We're doing data alignment and ETL, and then we're actually building.
Yes.
So and then over time, so you actually need all these things. And so the question I would have is, especially with a part-time resource, that it's actually great that they're heavily invested to the outcome, but do they actually have a superpower? So are they better at the product definition? Are they better at the design? Are they better at the data alignment? Are they better at building dashboards? Right. So trying to put somebody to say, hey, take this Y and do all these functions, you may want to figure out who you're dealing with and then assign them, hey, you know what, you're really good at coming up with a why. So you meet with all the business partners, you come up with all the whys. You to think about it from this like this whole design perspective. And then this other person maybe looks at it from the data side. Says, okay, what data do we have? How do we twist and turn it? How do we make it be what it is? So that's something else that we do a lot of, how we kind of sell all of our services, that we don't really sell it on one person. It's all whole like a team to team actually approach. So for anything that we do, you may only have like a certain number of hours, but we will flex in and flex out the right resource that's necessary. So with your process, I don't know what your Tiger team superpowers are. So I don't know that you can have a one size fits all to say, okay, hey, when you're new to this project, you always do this, because that person may not be good at that, And so I think that it's great to say that you can just throw bodies at something. I'm not sure that this is that thing.
Yeah, it certainly is. The first thing my spidey sense, went up about is like, there's this desire to throw bodies at it because, they have, some bench time. But that doesn't mean we're actually, what's the old, nine people can't make a baby in 1 month.
Right. Yeah.
So
if this is something that you're trying to do brand new, like if you had a honed process,
right,
and you could do it, and you knew how everything was going to work, you knew your naming conventions, and you had it nailed, then you might be able to take somebody new. Here, let me say this. So for our team, so I'll stop sharing because there's no sense in it right in a second. So for our team, anybody new spends the first X number of months on a just a whole QA process. So we put them on projects that are at this like QA list, right? So what that does for us is it actually trains them on how we write calculations, how we think about things, all our what's it, Tim? 72-point QA system that we follow. So we hammer that through with them. So your first X number of months for us is not built building dashboards. It's built learning how we build dashboards. And that's going to cover all the different processes. It's going to cover product definition. It's going to cover UI UX. It's going to cover like data structure. It's going to cover, actually building the dashboards. It's going to cover it all. I don't think that we could have somebody new and say, hey, can you go and just build this dashboard? It's just not going to work. Yep. And that doesn't even, and I would say it wouldn't work even if they were experienced in actually doing this work. Because Tim, you can tell the story. Tim is trained for years, and last year during COVID, when we lost training, he had to swap over and do consulting. Was that an easy process, Tim?
Yeah, no, so that's exactly something we were talking about today in our retro from this last working sprint cycle. But when you have even experienced people, the experience and the understanding of certain things just doesn't translate the same. And so my workbooks would be completely different than a different developer in our team. And so version control becomes a big issue when we have these also. We had a big project with a tight deadline, and that deadline made us sort of all working in the workbook at the same time, and 4 of us trying to edit on one workbook was just a painful experience, because you're trying to save different versions and people are writing calculations that may interrelate with one another. So I would definitely recommend, if you are going to have something like this, because you in your question said volunteers, and you've kind of said subject matter experts and things. So if those people are interested in getting involved, just focus on version control. Make sure that one thing, we can go in depth if we want to come back to it and dive into it, but saving a standardized Tableau data source that can be used across everyone inside of that workspace. So you essentially will save down all of your localized settings and changes and calculations. You put that on one shared drive so that everyone in the working group can point to that same, the terminology is a TDS file. So everyone can point to that TDS file, and then we guarantee that we're all working from the same sort of standardized, hopefully authorized data source. I'm teaching a group of, my group is like almost 40 people overall. It's almost 60 business managers for a big aerospace organization. And one of them was on a call saying, well, I just like to pull down my own data source and work from my own information because I know it's right. And the data kind of data steward, data security person, just about, you could hear through the mute button, you could hear the meltdown happening. So we got to be real careful when we spread the load out to make sure that things are standardized, and that helps with that version control.
And part of also this idea of like, are there offline things that could be done? Like, I don't want to call it busy work, but it's more like, you know, the templatizing of like, okay, here's how to gather, you know, like fill in these 4 billets, and, you know, sketch, you know, with this end in mind, or, you know, like to sort of get consistency among the team outside of Tableau, so that whoever actually then sits down and is building inside of Tableau,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't have to rethink everybody's input.
Yeah, I think you could probably do that if you're inside of one or two company. I mean, we haven't done that because, you know, we're a consulting agency, so we cover every type of company there is. So there's really no consistency. It's really a matter of understanding the business first, and then going from there. So
let me jump in on that though. One thing on that we do is we define a visual comp prior to building. And that actually then gives direction. So I have a client that I'm doing a development for them to build an internal tool to look at their marketing team and their analytics. So, you know, whatever social or any kind of data you'd expect to be around marketing analytics. And we actually made a comp for them and handed it off. And we're hopefully going to have set them up for success to build this dashboard with just a very pretty layout that's really not even done in Tableau. It's done in Adobe Illustrator, or if you know other graphic design programs.
That's definitely a key. We do that at stage 2. Those stages I showed you, we're defining the project and building the UI UX. So the UI UX is building a comp that we can mock up really quick, and we give that to the business, and then they say yes. What that really saves you down the road is for them actually changing their mind. Because if you build it all in Tableau, write out the calculations to make it work, then you show it to them, then they're going to change it.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
All right, let's make sure. I want to make sure we're. Does that answer your questions a
little
bit? I know
this is very helpful. Some of this, it was also helpful just to say it out loud. You know, as I say, you know, this team hasn't formed and it hasn't been assigned yet, but there was talk of it this week, of like, oh, you know, this will help. Yeah, and all those concerns that we talked about are still there.
Yeah, we don't so we're just starting. Not just starting. The last few months we've been doing these whole custom trainings where we use your data and train on how to use the product, and we do sprinkle in a lot of our own knowledge. So it really kind of, we're trying to bridge the gap, like Tim was mentioning, of him going from knowing all the training to actually, you know, hands to keyboard. The way we're doing our custom trainings really bridge that gap a lot better. So I don't know if these people have been trained in Tableau, if they've used it, but it'll cover a lot of that stuff. So if that's something that's of interest to you, then we can talk about that offline.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks again for tackling this one.
Awesome. Yeah,
Right.
thanks for
Does
putting it
anyone
in.
else have another question, or?
We do have one question around configuration of the 3 environments: Tableau Desktop, Tableau Bridge, and Tableau Online.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could get a little more clarity on what your question around configuration is there. If you want to come off mute.
Yeah, whoever had the question, I'll tell you one thing about the whole Tableau Bridge is it's this whole clunky solution for sure. Was that Ryan? Was that you that had the question?
I think it's.
I had the question.
Yeah, Musa.
My name is Musa.
Yes, welcome, Musa.
I think I worked with one of your colleagues last week on a conference call. She tried to help me. But I'm still having some issues with making sure that these 2 environments can work together. We currently have purchased the license, so I'm familiar with Tableau. I've been using it for about the past 2 years, but this is the first time that I'm asked to actually do the installation, the configuration, and make sure that everything is working together. Yeah. Because we used to have it as a tool coming from a third party. So they did everything for us. So pretty much I was just using the Tableau Desktop. And now I'm asked to do everything. And I'm having some difficulties really making sure that things are working together.
Yeah.
Some help on that.
This is something, I mean, there's not just an easy answer for this one, because it really depends on a lot of factors. One thing I will tell you is that if you're using the Tableau Online, and you want it to do a refresh of your data and it's behind a firewall, that's why you have the whole bridge product. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with that product. It's not simple to set up and configure because it's dealing with firewalls on both sides. So it's a lot of kind of trial and error on that one. Let's do this. Because I could talk hours about this one. Let's shoot me an email, or I think if we have your email address, let's talk next week, and let's meet and just talk about your options around it. So one, I'll just tell you this, that we actually host our own server that we host our own server that we lease out seats for other people, and it's for this exact reason, because you don't have full flexibility of Tableau Online. It's a black box hosted solution. You can't set up ISEC tunnels with it, which is probably what you're going to want to do. So with our Archie server, you can. So with what we would do is we actually eliminate the need for the whole Tableau Bridge product. So it would be just like you worked with it with your old company. You work in desktop, you publish the server, you're done. That's really what you want. And so Tableau Bridge is kind of the medium step in there. So I think that, let's talk about why you chose Tableau Online and make sure I understand that, and then we can go from there and get you a solution.
Sounds good. May I have your email address, please?
Yeah, it's Chris, CHRIS, @BoulderInsight.com. And I can put that in the chat too, just so make sure.
Yes, please.
There you go.
Yeah, great question there, and glad you guys will be able to connect. Also, Chris, we do have Musa's email. I just put it in the Slack, so we have access to that.
Great.
So great opportunity here. Good job, everyone, with the questions. Very interesting kind of topics to talk about. We'd love to get into the tool. We've talked a lot of concepts and things, but Chris has prepared a nice little kind of hands-on lesson for us today. So he's going to show us around some ways to work inside of our workbooks so that we can name our calculations a little differently than you may be used to, as well as kind of making on-the-fly changes when you realize that you need to add some extra functionality. So he's got it pulled up here. We'll pass it back to him and he'll take it from there.
Yeah, so before I jump in, make sure, is there any other questions before I kind of show you this little tip? Okay, if there are, just stop me. This won't take long anyway. So this is actually something that we just actually did for a client. This is kind of a rare thing for us, where this is actually public data. So it's something we can share and use, which is great for us. This dashboard here, out of all these, this is one that the data changed last minute before the go live, and we didn't have a chance to do what you'll find on the other dashboards is we have a show number, show percentage difference. So I just wanted to show you a couple of ways that we think about doing this just to make that toggle work. So like, for example, if I was going to do this, this graph here, so I'm just going to color the background just for formatting purposes. We always leave ours clear. We don't want to have any color in the background because we like to have our background of our dashboards to do all that stuff for us. That way we can make it really nice and neat. But so what we have here is we have this calculation that gives us the right metrics. But since we only have like a single dimension breaking things down, if I want to change this to a percentage of total, well, it changes the axis, but it doesn't change the actual shape of the bars, right? Because the percent of total with one dimension is the same thing as the actual numbers of that same dimension. So in this case, that toggle between, let me just hide all these so we can be clear here. Hide these guys, and I'll just show show this one, show parameter. Okay. So here's my show percentage, show number. So that is technically changing the axis, but it's doing nothing more than that. Actually, not even doing that right now, doing nothing. So all I really need to do is just change these labels. So I have right now it's on number, so I have dollar. I need to change to a percentage. So how we would do this is this. So one, I'll show you a little bit what we do on our calcs. We start all of our calcs with kind of a number. The reason why, I'm gonna change this one to a different number just so it gets out of our way. I'll use it later. Make sure I get it last. There we go. Okay, so this is the calculation that's used right here. The reason why we do the numbering is it really makes it quick to find something, because I always found before is trying to name them, I have little nuances and I have to read too much to figure out what it is. So now if I'm looking at 43, I know where 43 is. And then on the end, I can expect to see Calc 51 and Calc 59 used kind of inside here. So if I know I got nested calculations, I'll see that now this is 43. I've got, 51 is used, and then 29 is used. And then 51 uses 20, 29 uses 23 and 28. So I can really trace back my calculation nesting really easily. So that's a great thing that we do. So if I was going to write some calculations to be these text fields, probably the first thing I would do is just make them so I have the right names, because your naming convention is really key. So I would just duplicate this one, and I'm just going to edit it. So I'm not worried about what's in here at this point. We'll just put a 1 just to have something, and this is going to contain 43 because that's what we're using. And it's going to be 43 number. So this is going to be this text field that I'm going to use, but I'm going to have it as a number. So I'm just going to get my naming down first. And this one's the same thing, except it's not going to be a copy. Still using 43, and it's going to be a percentage. Okay. So now I have those set. So now I just want to make them right. So instead of the 1, I want to leverage my sheet. I just want to drag in, that was my number. There's my sum. So that one's done. And then this is my percentage. So get rid of the 1. And I'll drag in this one, because remember I already did the whole percent of total. So since I did it here, it's going to actually do it for me. It's going to go ahead and give me my percent of total. It's going to say my sum of 43 divided by the total sum of 43. So that's perfect. Okay, so now I've got those two generally in shape. I can see that my parameter I want to use is called 2. So now all I need to do is wrap these with something, and I can probably go look at it. I can see it's show number and show percentage. So I just need to wrap these with some sort of an if statement to say if my number 2 this is where I do it. 2, there it is, 2p. So if number 2p, oh, here's something I always do. This is something that if you're having multiple people work on a workbook, sometimes people use lowercase, capitals. If I'm doing any if statements, I always try to wrap them with like an upper or something like that, or upper or lower. That way it doesn't matter. Any sort of case is not going to matter for you. And then I would just say, you know, show number. And that one, and else nothing, right? So all I'm doing is saying if my parameter is equal to show number, then I'm going to show that calculation, else I'm going to do nothing, okay? And I'm going to use this same thing inside of my percentage. Okay, so same exact calc, end, except I want to say this one should be show percentage. Okay, so now those two are built. The only, so let me go ahead and drag those in. So I'm gonna take this off, and now let's just drag in both these to label, my number and my percentage. And the only key here is I want to put them side by side. So because since it's a toggle of like either or, they can both be there, but only one will show up. So depending on what my toggle is. So now that's going to be my dollar amount because it's show number, and then this is going to be percentage. So now I would just need to kind of format those. Let me show you one thing. So one other thing, and I'm gonna do it wrong first, and I'll show you why we don't do it this way. So on the dollar sign, remember before it had dollars per actually month. Well, I could go in here and I could say I want to add to the end of this, I want to add a string that says per month, right? Well, that's going to break. That's going to break because I can't put in a float and also a string. So I think, okay, well, no problem. I'll just make this kind of a string as well, right? I could just do that. So that's going to work. That's going to make my calculation work. What it's going to do for me though is it's going to say, but now I have to do a lot of work. Whereas if I wanted this to show up, it's going to look right. Oops, actually didn't even work. But oh, it came in as a true false. Then string. Oh, should be plus right here. There we go. So it's going to work, but now I don't have the ability to kind of do my whole format on this. I'm not going to be able to format it as a currency, right? So because I have now turned it into a string. So I really need it to be the way it was, and I need to come up with another formula that gives me my end. So that would be a much better way to do it. So I'm just going to hit back a few times to get back to where we were here. Okay, so now I'll just duplicate this one again, and instead of my formula, I want this one to be my string for per month. And we'll just call this one like, text or whatever, like a T. Okay, okay, so now I have this field as well. So I'm going to put that on label. I want to make sure that it comes in the right spot. So there's my T, and back it up, it's got to be at the end. Okay, so now when I go to my show number, it'll be there. And so now I can format these ever how I want. So I can format this one as in my pane as currency custom with no dollar or no decimals. And this one I can format as my percentages as no decimals. And there we go. So now we've got $25 per month, and we've got our 23%. So it's all based on just, just that one calculation, but making it different ways. So let me pause there and see what you guys think about that. All right.
Hey, Chris, can you open up the label so we can look at the actual label edit that you've done on the marks card?
Yeah.
So just to clarify a little bit on what's going on here, the reason that everything has to be on the same line, because Chris was editing and sort of tightening it up, and he said, well, we got to bring these up to the same line. That's because what is essentially happening is you have, it's 3 use cases there that it wants to label. Yeah. And so if he had those on individual lines, when we build the bar chart behind it and he switches the parameter, it's going to shift those numbers and make them go on to different areas. And as you see here, he's not getting the labels on every bar because it's sort of stepping it outside of its allowed spaces. Yeah, so here you can see he has this now set where we can show marks where they overlap other items. But because that was turned off, he only got maybe 3 of those labels. So the reason it's important that we do some of this formatting is actually we're essentially making a null out of the values that are in the list, except for the one that's selected. So when he puts them all on the same line, you get like blanks in where the nulls would be, and then you get the real value where the number should be. And so making sure that we format it nicely and have it all in the same space allows it to look right and play right.
Definitely, yeah. So that null you can make be nothing, but if it is on a different line, you can't get rid of that whole break. So the break is what you want to eliminate. So you just take them out. It's like here, put them on top of each other, which is exactly how it's written. So these are on top of each other, versus these are all side by side. So side by side works fine.
Good stuff. Any questions on that idea that we've got going on here?
I can keep going on these if you want. So, and then these will be a little different. So these type of charts, I would probably do as a, instead of doing it, I'll just do one. Instead of doing these the same way, I would probably just make a duplicate graph of this one. And for this company, I already know that they don't want anything on the label. And I would just literally make this a percent of total, and then just have it be a separate graph. So percent of table, compute using table across, right? So that gives us our things, and I could change this format to be a percentage in case you did want it. So that way they all work. So 19%, whatever. Okay, so now I have this separate graph. And I think I already have these in the containers. I actually do. So now I have these in containers. So I would just put them inside a container and then hide the title. Okay, so now I need to come in here and make another calc that says when this is show number, show this one. When it show percentage, show this one. So this one either hides. So I got to get rid of the end line here. So show header and move reference line. And show header. There you go. All right, so those are all clean now. So let's do that really quick. So we're on show number. So let's just say we want to create a calculated field called show. Actually, probably should know. Would normally number it or percentage, and say if score 2 2.p, that one, if that equals show number, then show else show percentage, right? So basically, you're just doing this to help you build things out. So this calc now, show number. So there we go. So now this one, I'm going to click show number, and then I'm going to change it. Parameter. It's here somewhere. There it is. So now I'll change it to show percentage. So this is going to wipe out and be nothing. And I go back to here. Oops. Lost my. Oh, what happened? Lost my dashboard all of a sudden. Did it just shut down on me? Huh. I think I lost it.
That's weird.
Yeah. No, this is it. Must have brought up something else. Okay. So click back to the dashboard. That one should go away. Now I can go into this one and drag in that same count. So show percent or number. This time show percentage is going to be shown. Just check it. So that works. So now, if I show number, then that dashboard is going to hide, or that worksheet's going to hide. It's going to show the other one, and that was going to adjust like we just made earlier. So it's a matter of just swapping things out. The other key when you're doing these, so technically there's another one in there. It is Tableau defaults you to padding of 4. So you see I got a little padding on this one. So that one is 4. So I want to get rid of that. So it doesn't take up any extra room. So I'm getting rid of all that. That way it doesn't take up any extra space when it's not being shown. So that's another key there. So it was small, but you probably wouldn't even notice it, but I would notice. So
just in a recap, we're leveraging a container object from the dashboard. That's what these sheets are hiding in. So the container locks the space that those two sheets are going to live inside, that Chris is actually sort of hiding and showing inside of. And then as you use the trick he just showed, the null that we're creating, like we talked about in the labels, is actually nulling out the chart. So that's why it's hiding, is technically there's nothing to be shown because the parameter is being told to filter out unless it's the parameter value that you want to show. So it's a neat little trick. And then what Chris is saying about the padding is really important, because if you don't remove the padding and you look at the labels, they'll shift by maybe 4 or 5 pixels when you hide things. So if you do a container where they're left and right, you'll actually see the chart kind of move a little left and right, or you'll see it go up and down a little. So getting rid of that padding makes it a lot smoother.
Yeah.
And
if it's only 1 or 2 charts, it's not that big a deal, but I've had containers where I've had to put like 4 or 5 in there, and all of a sudden it really starts shifting.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially when you get multiples is when it starts getting more noticeable. So good show there. Just to open up the opportunity for anyone that may have come up with questions while that was going on. We haven't received anything in chat. We can circle on one other concept before we go that we had mentioned earlier, but I want to make sure if anyone has something specific that you'd like to see, we'd be happy to show you that. Or I have something prepared that I can take over for this last little bit that kind of touches back to Paul's conversation around working groups and making sure that we have some standardization to our data sets.
Of course, also I see John's on the call. John, do you have any questions?
Yeah, John's one of our Tableau trainers here as well. He's a trainer with us.
Sorry, I'm like quadruple muted. No, I'm okay. Just enjoying to be on the call and seeing what kind of questions are coming through. But everything's always, I love that container trick myself. We teach that in the advanced class, and we get a lot of ahas from that.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Well, thanks, John. All right. Well, I'm going to teach you guys just a quick little idea around this concept of that saved data source. Does everyone see my alphabet soup? Is that what's coming up on there? Good. Yeah. I got the right screen. All right, so I like to start off with alphabet soup because this is the most 3-letter acronyms that I could probably slam into one single slide. Okay, I remember when I first heard the term 3-letter acronym, TLAs, right? And I was like, what are TLAs? Well, it's a 3-letter acronym for a 3-letter acronym, right? So we're going to look at TDSs quickly here in the tail end of our call. And TDSs are what essentially is a Tableau data source. Sometimes in classes with Heather and me, we'll actually say, think about it less as a data source and think about it more as maybe a data connection. So maybe a TDC would have been a better naming because calling it a source can sometimes confuse it with your data source, your Excel files, your server data sources. But what we're talking about here is a localized data source. So Tableau is a read-only relationship with your data. It actually does not write back to the data source, and it's going to make anything that we do in Tableau sort of have to have a space to live that we can store and we can save that's outside of, say, our Excel file. So for simplicity, I'm just going to leverage Excel as my data source. Great question coming in. I'll make sure I loop this into the talk. What's the difference between live data and extract? So we'll talk about that. And what should we use for best practice between the two? Perfect. So with the idea of this broader sort of alphabet soup, we start to see that there's TWBXs. We probably are all very, very familiar with those. We save most of our workbooks into a TWIBX file. And so I've sort of outlined the components that make up a TWIBX file. We get a workbook, we get a TDS file, and we get an extract of our actual data source. Let's say back to that Excel file, right? So each one of these 3 elements sort of plays a different role inside of Tableau as to how we connect to data, how we interpret data, and the such. And so we'll touch on live and extract when we get to this far right side. But right now, let's focus on kind of these 2 files. We have a workbook and we have a TDS file. And that actually, I could draw the way I built this. I can't quite get it in Tableau, so I'll draw this manually. If I just look at those 2 elements, a workbook is going to be all my views. It's going to be my my things that I've visualized inside of Tableau. So it's worksheets, it's dashboards, it's story points. It's going to be any of my graphical representations that Tableau is sort of utilizing to make my visualization. My TDS file is the piece that we were talking about with Paul earlier, where if I want to make sure that all of the things I do inside of Tableau, like write calculations, creating groups, we make parameters like Chris just talked about. Well, those live in the metadata or in the cached information that Tableau saves. And that's what this TDS file is. So it's physically that space where when I was saying to Paul, let's make sure we have one file saved to, say, a shared server, and then everyone can tap into that file. Well, that's the TDS file. So we can actually share that down and save it by itself as a single component. Or if we don't package our workbook, the X in a TWBX is packaging the values. So if we don't package it at its base level, we could save a TWB, and that is just my workbook, so my views and just my things I made in Tableau. Because remember, we're read only with Excel. Let me show you that kind of here at the data source on my workbook. My Excel file here is global sports finances as the data source. My values that I'm reading only and I'm communicating back when we talk about like calculations at a calculated field level, we leverage the data source to do those aggregations or those calculations. Well, those are all happening in this sort of blue marked columns. So you see all these things that are blue live in Excel. They're not going to be modified. Tableau is going to read only to those. But you see here team and league abbreviation, those are calculations. Same with over here. They're values that live in that TDS file. So we want to save these down, and then when we share and we combine workbooks, we bring in that connection from that TDS file, then all of this stuff that is not necessarily being colored with a blue bar is going to be shared in and saved into that file. So it's kind of a harder concept when you're just trying to look at Tableau in a conceptual kind of just at surface level. But when we really get into these sort of working groups and things, it becomes helpful to know about this file type, because that's sort of how you leverage that with a managed Excel file. And then you know that you have sort of control over your data and your information that's in there. The last piece is an Excel, is a data extract. So when we package the workbook, it's actually going to snapshot an extract of that data source, and it's going to save it into that Twibix file. So just a real quick kind of warning on this. It's really easy to unpackage a packaged workbook. It's literally 2 clicks on a workbook, and you can pull your data source straight out of a Twibix file. So I want to warn you, if you have like really private data and things like that, here, it's just this option in the menu. You just unpackage it and it'll pull out that data. So that's another reason why a TDS file and maybe a TWB can be nice, is you don't bring down your data. You don't have floating data sources living out in the wild. And then just quickly to answer Musa's question directly, the difference between an extract and a live data connection is something we can see back at our data source. It's often right here in the data connection phase radio buttons. So a live data connection, anytime I need to query that data source, it's going to actually be pushing out to the data source. So if my data source is on a server, or if it's on some other shared drive, you may see some performance issues going on with that. You may see some slowdowns, but it's a live connection. So it's going to be sort of updating every time we query, every time we request, it'll be pushing that newest level of data. When you run an extract, I actually have to go to a worksheet for it to save. So let me click over to a dashboard and back. When you run an extract, you'll see it actually snapshots in time. It's going to tell me when that extract was run. And then by default, Tableau will either update that data source when you push refresh or when you reopen your workbook. So every time you open the workbook, or if you're on the server and you open it up in the server, it's going to try and query that data source up to date. But this allows a little bit faster work, because no longer are we querying outside to, say, an external data source on a server or something like that. We're going to leverage an extracted, saved snapshot of that data source, and then that makes it a lot faster. It's something that Chris actually has trained us all into our processes. You'll generally find that our workbooks run on an extract because of the efficiencies that we see out of that, and the ability to kind of work without any interruptions with the server connections.
Yeah, the other thing on that, I mean, definitely for the development phase, you know, it is really key to have it be as fast as possible, because you're not going to know what's going to take a long time. So if you have a local extract, it's way easier to do that. If you have a fast appliance on the other side, just for the data security standpoint, it's always best to have a live connection. But yeah, but definitely for development, if you can do an extract and then switch to live, that's really your best bet.
Yeah, that's great. And then just one last thing on this topic, if you are interested in a TDS, we save that on the data menu here. So you're going to want to make sure you set up all of your default properties. Like Chris was showing, we wanted to format to be percentages and show the percentage sign or the dollar sign. So you want a default property, have that all cleaned up, have all your calcs and things prepared. You can always save another TDS file. And essentially, if you're trying to do that shared working file, you just overwrite the original. But I get that as close to the way I want it. And then you go on to actually, I wonder if I have to do this from a worksheet. It's been a minute since I've done this. You do it on the data source, the data menu, and then you come down onto that actual dropout for the data source, and you can add to saved data sources. And what's cool is when you do that, it's going to save into your Tableau repository. And if you're using it personally, your data will show up down here in this data source tab under the Save Data Sources selection. But if you're going to do something maybe like what Paul might want to be doing, I would take that out of my repo file and I put it onto that shared drive where everyone can access it. All right. So hopefully that's a nice little tip for you guys. TDS files are one when I teach my classes. A lot of people kind of are like, whoa, that was a lot. But this is a very particular use case where I think it's really fitting for the conversation. So thank you everyone for coming. We really enjoyed having you here. Great questions this week. Thanks, Chris, for throwing out some really good knowledge to the group. We do this every first Friday of the month. So you guys are more than welcome back next month to come join us. And also we post our videos of the actual live session onto our YouTube channel. You guys can go back and watch if you wanted to see any notes or if Chris showed you something and you can't quite remember specifically a step. We'll have that all up there for you so you can review later on. We also do a drawing for a free working session for a half hour with Chris. So if you win that, we'll be reaching out and contacting you directly. Otherwise, we hope you guys have a great month. Glad to have you here again with us, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one. Take care.